So we are continuing from where we had left off, doing Tennyson's Ulysses. We have done till line 32. And just a short recap: Ulysses is back in Ithaca. Ulysses is the king, but Ulysses is absolutely dissatisfied with his life as a king, with his duties as a king. And this dissatisfaction, this frustration, gives rise to resentment in Ulysses towards the people around him, his wife, his citizens, his population, whom he considers to be savages who only hoard and feed and sleep, who have no iota of honor in their bodies, just because they do not have wanderlust like Ulysses does. And this existential angst brings out the real desire in Ulysses's heart, which is to embark upon the seas again, which is merry troop of men, and traverse the earth, and if fate be good to him, die on the seas, as die the death of an adventurer on the seas. And now we are coming to, well, I'll see if we could complete this today in this lecture. So line 33 to 34, in these 10 lines, now must always be remembered that Ulysses is nonetheless the king of Ithaca, and the king cannot just forsake his duties uh, just like that, because the king has wanderlust and he is absolutely dissatisfied with his life as a stationary monarch. He just cannot forsake it uh, and just wander away. Now, this is again against the moral code of conduct of warriors, of leaders. And Ulysses, even though he is dissatisfied with his life as a king, and he, by his own uh, admission, that he's not a very good king, but he does adhere to this moral code of conduct. And so, what we find in 33 and 34 is almost a sort of justification for his wanting to go out on his journeys, and a kind of a future planning where he speaks about handing his reign to his son Telemachus. And then he gives an account of the qualities of Telemachus. This is my son, my own Telemachus, to whom I leave the scepter and the isle, well loved of me, discerning of to fulfill this labor by slow prudence, to make mild a rugged people, and through soft decrees subdue them to the useful and the good. Most blameless is he, centered in the sphere of common duties, decent not to fail in offices of tenderness, and may meet adoration to my household gods. When I am gone, his work, when I am gone, his work, I mine. He works his work, I mine. So he's kind of putting in a description and kind of justifying his choice for naming Telemachus the king, or thinking of the fact that even in his absence, Telemachus would be a more worthy ruler than he is. And he jots down, he points down all the qualities of Telemachus, the fact that he's loved by Ulysses and he's loved by the people. He may not have wanderlust, he may not be a great adventurer by heart, uh, like his father Ulysses, but nonetheless he is a good leader. He is a good leader of men. He is a kind of monarch which is required by an isle of men who want to live their lives peacefully with a filled belly. And the rugged people, and through soft decrees subdue them to the useful and the good. Most blameless is he, centered in the sphere of common duties, decent not to fail. So he's again singing his praises, singing his praise, that how he has the capacity to tame rugged people into his own way, subdue them into not domination, not subdue them in the sense of dominating them, but then make them realize what is good for the country, and inspire them to act accordingly. And he's most blameless. So again, his character is almost gets validated by Ulysses. He's blameless of any sins, and he's centered to the sphere of common duties. So duties are his are everything in his life for him, and or he harps upon his duties, and he's decent not to fail in the offices of tenderness. And the gods love him, meet adoration to my household gods. So the gods love him, Ulysses loves him, uh, the people love him. He has all the qualities that a king requires, a king uh, who rules his people requires. And so Ulysses, in the very last line, says he works his work, I mine. His work, Telemachus's work, is leading a country of men, an island of men, leading a civilization. Whereas Ulysses's work is adventure, is going out to the seas with his merry band of men on in the seas and tackling those heavy, huge waves and meeting new lands, new customs, seeing new places, experiencing new ways of politics, government. So he's pointing out the fact that everyone has a work in this life, in this universe, in the broader perspective of the universe. Everyone has a work, and if the person does the work that he is good at, only then can there be salvation or deliverance. So Ulysses is now the king, but Ulysses agrees to the fact that he's not a very good king, and as a result, he's dissatisfied with his own kingship. And he says that it is not his work, it is Telemachus's work. Telemachus is the king, the strong king that his people need, just like Ulysses is the adventurer that the world needs. Then we come to another big portion, line 44 to 61. This I'm not going to read these lines, but just going to explain them because I can't. Reading line 44 to 61 will take up some time. You can get the text easily. The text is easily available uh, on the internet. The explanations are easily available on the internet. You can obviously use my PPT, the explanations I put up on my PPT in your answers or for your explanation, for your understanding. So uh, logistical resource to this poem is not a very huge challenge. So line 44 to 61 is where he addresses his men, the mariners with whom he had journeyed the earth, the mariners with whom he had traveled to Troy. When I say mariners, I actually mean, or Tennyson actually means uh, warriors. They are warriors. They're not just mariners who just undertake a voyage. They are warrior. They are warrior people, and he addresses those mariners, and he inspires them. He looks to inspire them for that one last journey. He tells them that the sea is calling and the ship awaits, and he tries to rekindle the fire of wanderlust in his compatriots' hearts. Even though the fire of wanderlust in many of his compatriots' heart may have been doused by the return to Ithaca and civilian life, civilizational life, a life of stability. But through lines 44 to 61, Ulysses is vehemently trying to rekindle that fire, and he tells them that they may be old, death may be around the corner, but before they succumb, there will be one last voyage beyond the sunset and no return. It is crystal clear that Ulysses intends to go out with a bang and not a whimper. Now, the point is, Ulysses does not expect or desire to return. Ulysses has now reached a point in his life where he does not want any half-heartedness with his wanderlust. And just as we had seen in the earlier part that Ulysses wants the death of an adventurer, he craves the death of an adventurer, and that is what he says and he puts out in these lines. He inspires his people, he inspires his compatriots by telling them that if they undertake the journey, they may succumb, but that death will be uh, that death will be a great one, that death will be a very honorable one, that death will be a very satisfying one. And then he speaks about his voyage where he says that they shall go beyond the sunset. So if you look at the horizon when it comes to a sea or an ocean, you will see that the sun sets into the ocean or into the sea. It would look as if the sun is going down beneath the surface of the sea. And he wants to voyage beyond that sunset. So he wants to voyage the extreme limits of the earth. And he makes it clear that there is no intention of return. This is the final and the most revolutionary and the most scathing adventure that he and his compatriots will ever undertake. And he warns them beforehand that there is no desire that, or there is no chance of return. They shall undertake the voyage and then die. And when they shall succumb to an honorable adventurer's seafarer's death. He's saying with some conviction that old age is no excuse to sit and do nothing. Life can still be lived, useful work can still be done. Now, this is again, you'll find a parallel to these philosophies in the Yeatsian poems, in Yeats's poems, where Yeats, in a poem, describes the human body to an old building, an old dilapidated building, but he then shows the image of a mouse who is scurrying inside that old building, and he identifies the heart, he identifies the mind, the heart with that mind, with that rat. And so, even though the body might be might be old and powerless, like that almost dilapidated building, but the mind, if it is active like the rat, always scurrying around to all corners of the house, then even in old age, various seemingly impossible tasks can be accomplished by us. The mind should be like the rat. The mind should be active. The mind should not fester. Even though the body might fester, the mind should be young. The mind should not feel the burden of the old age of the body. I'd say this is exactly what Ulysses tells his merry band of men. He tells them that old age is no excuse to sit in home. It is actually the mind that fuels the body and not the other way around. So even if the age is old, it is the mind, the wanderlust in the mind, the desire for adventure piercing through the veins of their bodies that actually work the body in unison. And so old age is no reason for them to sit at home and just while away their time until death comes. As again, if we go back to the previous part, he wants to journey towards death and not just let death come towards him. So with he tells his men that while sitting at home, they are just waiting for death to come, where as in fact they should be journeying towards death. Sorry, yeah, line 62 to 70, this is the ending part of the poem. And in the ending part, in this conclusion of the poem, after he had inspired his men to undertake that last journey, he still continues to inspire them. He still continues to inspire them, and he tells them how they shall be remembered as legends, as great warriors, as great men of the world. And even though their bodies and their minds should die, their legends are going to be told and retold and sung and resung throughout generations. And here we see some Greek mythology again. They might sink, drown, end up on the happy islands of the blessed in Greek mythology. Elysium, abode of the gods and the heroes, patriots, located beyond the western horizon. Now, here again, Ulysses tries to make a journey beyond the sunset. The sun sets on the western horizon. So where Ulysses is trying to go is the fabled Elysium, which in Greek mythology is the place where all the great men, all the great warriors, adventurers, leaders, everyone who has made their life worthwhile, it is an abode for those men. And so he urges his men that let us make that journey, let us not die in Ithaca, let us make that journey beyond the western horizon, beyond the sunset, and reach Elysium, where they shall be united with great warriors like Achilles. Achilles figures in Homer's Iliad, extensively figures in Homer's Iliad. He's uh, a Myrmidon who fights under allegiance to Agamemnon in the Trojan War. He kills uh, the eldest son of Priam, the king of Troy, Hector, who is also a great warrior. And Achilles is a legendary figure. He dies at the end of Iliad when an arrow uh, shot by Prince Paris, the younger son of Priam, the king of Troy, pierces his ankle. and he dies. And from there we get the English idiom Achilles' heel, which means the weak part. Well, but we are not going into that. So he wants to go to Elysium. He wants to go to that fabled Greek abode of the patriots and the heroes beyond the Western horizon, so that he can again catch up with and spend the rest of his life, spend the rest of his time uh, in heaven or earth or between the two with someone like Achilles, someone he has admired, someone he uh, has admired so much. We are what we are, Ulysses says, that is older now, but still full of yearning for new things. He will never give in. So Ulysses, this again, wanderlust comes back. He just won't give in for what he had already experienced. The desire to continue exploring and experiencing newer and newer and newer things always hits back at Ulysses. So even though time wears them, even though they may find themselves depressed because they are weakened, because their body is weakened, with age the body weakens and they are no longer the warrior that they were when they fought in Troy. Uh, but there is always the will to strive. Again, going back to that building and the rat metaphor, uh, the mind has to be like the rat. There has to be the will to scurry about. There has to be will is everything. That is what we see. And even in the last line, see the last four line, one equal temper of heroic hearts made weak by time and fate, but strong in will but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. So will is everything. Even the heroic hearts, even if they are made weak by time and fate, but the strength of will is all it takes to strive, to seek and find, and then to not yield is absolute folly. And this is what he does not want. So in these last four lines, he's doing two things. One is showing them how the heart should actually be. And then again, it's almost like a sarcastic remark where even though the heart is willing, they are not yielding. They are striving to do so. They are striving to for an adventure. They're seeking for an adventure, but they are not yielding to that desire. They must yield to that desire. So this is the poem. What the poem is about. Now, another thing which should be remembered is the fact that Ulysses, Oscar Wilde, had a dear friend, Arthur Henry Hallam, who died, and Oscar Wilde had written the elegy that is associated with Arthur Henry Hallam's death is In Memoriam. But again, in Ulysses, we find shades of Oscar Wilde's uh, frustrated and depressed psychological condition, where Tennyson's friend Arthur Hallam died young. It was a tragic event that brought the poet initial grief and sadness and caused him to question his own existence and purpose. Ulysses was written to exorcise the demons and transform an individual. Change for the better is always possible, out of darkness and into light. So Tennyson identifies himself with Ulysses. Just like Ulysses, when he comes back to Ithaca and the existential angst and crisis that he feels gives him grief, gives him sadness, and he questions his own purpose. But he rallies his mind and he rallies his men and undertakes that final revolutionary voyage. So the change from grief, sadness, existential crisis to desire, to a change in attitude, to that final journey, that is what the poem is about. The passage from darkness to light. The poem starts with darkness and the poem is ending with light, where it is, we almost take it for granted that all these men under Ulysses's command have now been have now been fully inspired to undertake that journey. So they are coming from grief and sadness and the questions of their own existence. They are now sure of their existence and what they want to do with that existence. So the journey from darkness to light. Similarly, if we put in the paradigm of Henry Hallam, the deaths put the deaths put Tennyson. Sorry if I called Tennyson Oscar Wilde at some previous time in the lecture. I'm sorry for that. I all sometimes get just mixed up with the names. Yeah. So Tennyson is almost desiring the same. And the poem is almost like an inspiration to himself, where he must move out of this darkness of grief and existentialism which is cast over him by the death of his dear friend Arthur Henry Hallam. I'm going to end the lecture. Probably this is the final part. I'll see if there's another, if you need another part consisting of the themes or the symbols or that. So this is the poem done.